Well, so here's what we're after. This is the worn, I have no idea what model number this is, locking hub for the front of a 56 NAPCO. In this case, it's a GMC. And this is kind of what we started with. So I'm going to kind of walk through what's involved with rebuilding these things. It's actually pretty simple. It saved two little small steps. So I'm going to walk through how to do that. And I'm going to start with the biggest challenge I had was on the inside of this is this screw. And this is the piece that kind of keeps everything together. And you can see there's two little indents left and right of the the slotted screw. And you got to grind those things out. You could use a little Dremel. I don't have a Dremel. Actually, I do, but I never use it. And I generally like something with a little bit more horsepower. So I'm going to go to it with a die grinder with a pointed cone bit on it. But once you get those grind out, then that screw will come out, and then the whole thing will come apart. You do notice that one of these little pins is missing. So I'm going to go see if that just fell out in the bag or if it was missing. On this other one, someone had broke the bolt off in the hub, so I'm going to have to drill that bolt out of the hub, and then I'll have to just make another bolt with this slotted head. That won't be available. So, all right, so I'm going to go to work. Hey, before we get started today, please take a second to subscribe to the channel. And if you're already subscribed, well, you're freaking awesome. While you're at it, tap the bell, and that way you'll get a notification each time I post one of these exciting videos. And that way you'll never miss a new episode on this or any future builds. Finally, if you like the video or you learned something today, well, give it a thumbs up and drop me a comment in the comment section, because you can imagine how much I like to read all those comments. And your likes and comments really do help me reach a broader audience. So with that, well, let's get started. All right, you can kind of see in there, I just took this cone-shaped carbide cutter and just round that out just right where that screw is. Just enough that I can spin the screw out. Okay, next thing to do is I came in here, and once you get that out, it'll just pop out. It's pretty easy to do. And then when that happens, this locking plate should fall out of there. If it doesn't, you may want to leave the screw in and then just tap down on the screw to get it loosened up. And when it does, you can see that in this case, all these old busted up O-rings segments came out of there. So this plate has an O-ring on this side and has an O-ring in this groove. So I'll have to go kind of source a new O-ring, but that's the hard part's done. All right, once you get that screw out, there's a little flat plate which indexes onto this pin down inside this thing. There's this little piece that threads up into this, I don't know what you call it, locking ring. This is what actually engages to put it into four-wheel drive. So, and this has some kind of fancy pieces on it. It'll thread all the way through, so it's best to kind of just thread that out. And then you're left with this piece here. So that's really all the pieces. So I'm going to set about cleaning all this stuff up. I'll bead blast all the parts and components and polish them up on the wheel. And then on this aluminum, I usually kind of brush that with a wire wheel. And then I have it's actually a deburring wheel, but it makes kind of a brushed finish. So I'll do that on all the pieces you can see. The last piece to get apart, and again, I don't know what this is actually called, but the last piece to get apart is this hub that actually engages under the spline. And to take it apart, right in here is one of these little C-clips, and it's sort of a booger bear to get out because it's big. So I have a pair of inexpensive C-clip pliers, which kind of work mediocrely well, and you just spread that out, and then I had to get a screwdriver to kind of help lift it up off the edge. And once it does, that'll come into two components. You want to kind of pay attention that there's a ring on this side, and then it's shallow, and then there's a ring on this side, and it's deep. And that deep side is where the C-clip ring goes onto this little hub. So I got it spread, and now what I'm had to do is just kind of come in here and use a screwdriver to, I'm gonna have to use both hands, but just pry this up and then it'll pop right off. All right, once you get that off, then this little, whatever this is, comes out of there, and there's a ball bearing down on the inside of this, and this appears to be a caged bearing that's probably kind of pressed in, and on the other one, these are all fine. There's no rust or pitting in there. So I just cleaned all that up really well on the other one, and I'll do the same thing on this one. Okay, all the pieces that I've glass beaded out of the bead box. You'll see this, I don't know what you call this, but I mean, there's just nowhere, there's just a little bit where you can see those bearings were polishing off the shaft, but there's definitely no wear. So I'll now really clean all these up and brush them off, and we'll be pretty close. And I've got all the parts now in the Parkerizing bath. So the first one is just boiling water, which just gets them really clean. Try not to touch them with my hand, gets them really clean, and then heats them up. And then we'll drop them into the Parkerizing tank right there. It's manganese phosphate, and it'll make them black and somewhat corrosive resistance. Okay, I can't find the pin. I don't think it was in there. It's clearly been gone into. There's all the bolts are ground off on one side for some reason, and there's a couple bad washers on there. So these shafts are right at 243, just under a quarter of an inch. And I have a piece of stock here that is 246. So I think what I'm going to do is go put this in the lathe and just use some emery cloth to just polish this down to 243, and then I'll make a little shaft to go in here. All right, I got everything cleaned up. Appears that I am also missing one of these bolts, and one of these bolts is shorter than the other one. And they're definitely this longer bolts. So someone has been into this thing before, because there's a missing bolt and a missing pin, and this one was broke off. So it looks like I'm going to be making two bolts. I'll have to source those. But I got everything cleaned up. I got everything parkerized. It has a really nice, black finish here. Reasonably corrosive resistance. I'll put a link. I have a full video on how to do Parkerizing, and I'll put a link here to it in case you're interested in how to do that. This I just shined up. It looks like it's some kind of CAD plating. I got our new pin made. Got everything here. I buffed the edges of this so it'd go on nice and smooth inside that chamber. And I think the next thing to do here is just to put a little bit of grease. This is going to get greased once the axles are all back in and greased up and so forth, but no reason not to put a little extra lube on this, and just, if nothing else, just sort of assembly lube to make it go together nicely. So we got that done. I got this piece here, and remember there's a deep and a shallow, so we're going to put that in through there. And that's all good and nice and clean. And this is the one that's kind of a booger bear to get back on there. Let's see if I can figure out how to get this in there without shooting it all the way across the shop. So, takes my belly. My pliers are not very good pliers. These are pull apart pliers, and they make these where you squeeze them and it actually pushes apart, and mine aren't that way, so I'm having to kind of use my big old beer belly. All right, so once you get that on there, and you can just push it down till it snaps in the ring. So much better than what it was. And then we're going to take this piece here, and each of these little rods go down in here. Should be 8 of them. These will come out the face, but not really. I don't think they're supposed to. I took them when I took them out and just pried them on the top, just gently enough to loosen them up, and then I got in underneath here and pried them up. Like I said, they will come out the front with a little bit of effort, but I don't think that's really the way they're supposed to come out. So I'm putting them back in there sort of properly. And once I get those in there, I was shooting just a little. See, that one just fell out. And oddly enough, that's not the one I made now. So once that goes in there, then this little ring slides down in there. That's what engages. And then what I did, and I noticed on this thing, this little pin, well, it's not coming out now, but that little pin came out earlier. So you're gonna want to kind of watch that and make sure that pin doesn't come barreling out of there. And let's see, how did I do this before? I think what I did was I threaded this in there. And it's a backwards thread. Might make note of that if you're doing this. You don't really have to thread it out, but if for some reason you do, it's a backwards thread. And then once that goes in there, then this little piece sits on top, and there's a hole for that pin, like that. And by the way, there's supposed to be a, I don't think I have it quite in there right. There's supposed to be a O-ring here on this that I'm gonna have to go get the O-ring. Why is that not going back on there like it's supposed to? Oh, I think this has to go on the outside. I gotta put this on first. Gotta put this on here. And don't forget the inner O-ring down here on the inside. So yeah, I got ahead of myself. I put so many of these together, sometimes I just get ahead of myself, not put one together. Okay, so once you get that in there, then I still got all my deals. Drop that in there. It sits down on top of that pin, because that's what screws this. That's what screws this mechanism up when you drop it down into the piece, into the gear. Got to get that little plate lined up with that screw hole so the screw will go down in there. And I'm gonna have to take this apart when I get, again, just to get the O-ring. So I'm just putting this together just kind of to show you how it works right now. But looks like you just have to push it in a little bit further. And one of these pins, and this is not the pin I made, but that pin just keeps coming out. Okay. And then this ring has a bunch of grooves where it's clearly had the lock washers tightened down before, so I just flipped this thing over. I don't think it matters, and then it's got a nice pretty side. And one missing bolt. Okay, so there you have it. 2 worn hubs, and I don't know what time I started this exercise, but it probably took about an hour to take all that stuff apart, clean it, maybe a little longer since I'm doing a video, and had to make one extra pin. And I have to make 2 extra bolts, but that's pretty much had it back together, and they work just like they're supposed to. So we're good to go. Well, I hope you learned something today. If you did, consider subscribing to the channel, and don't forget to ring that bell so you get notification of future videos that will be equally as exciting as the one you just watched. Now, before you go, give me a thumbs up on the video and drop a comment in the comment box if you got any kinds of questions or just think you got to sound off on something. If you have something specific you want to know how to do, well, leave me a comment and I'll see if I can't capture some content for a future video. Hope you have a great day, and I'll see you back here for another Resto-Rat episode real soon.
Download the Resto-Rat app today to begin managing, tracking, and documenting your restoration project.